on this show. They are absolutely unbelievable. I'm incredibly happy to see him and very proud to work with her. The second one is my assistant and technical director, and that's Mr. Randy Collins. Now, I never know what Mr. Collins is going to walk out here with, but tonight, I have something. Casey?
There's crap.
What do you got?
She's
Good.
right here, baby.
So, anyway, thank you for coming. I'm really glad you're here. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I don't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that. For your sake, I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I do science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science for life, have you got the sandwiches cut and flaky crackle?
Yes, sir.
Oh! By the way, Lane, I read in the books that on Thursday night, when Mr. Williams dined with me, 8 bottles of champagne were listed down as being consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink champagne? I asked Millie for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of the first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up until the present.
I don't know that I'm much interested in becoming like Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
That'll do, Lane.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views of marriage are somewhat lax, really. Lower orders, what earth receives of them? They seem, as a class, to have no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthy.
How are you doing, dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What brings one anywhere these days? Eating as usual, ideology.
I find it customary to always partake in refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people.
And
It is
who-
excessively boring.
And who are these people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors, neighbors.
But nice neighbors in North Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely must amuse them. Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire. Yes, of course. Hello, borrow these cups. Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, really, Aunt Augusta and Wyndham.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, but I don't think Aunt Augusta will quite like you being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It's all as bad as the way she flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
There's nothing romantic in proposing. romantic to be in love, but nothing romantic about their proposal. One proposes, one usually is accepted. There, sentiment is all over. Romance is an uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll slowly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algie. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Yes, the divorces were made for them. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're made especially for Annie Gusto.
Well, you've been eating them this whole time.
That's quite different. She is my aunt. Here, have the bread and butter. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, don't use it when you eat it all. You act as if you're married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry who they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It explains for the extraordinarily number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I would give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin. And before I allow you to marry her, you must clear with the question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth, Algie, do you mean by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name Cecily.
Bring me the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room when he last dined here.
Yes, sir.
You mean to tell me you've had my cigarette case this whole time? I wish to goodness you had told me. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Oh, why wish you would offer one? I happen to be unusually hard up.
There's no use offering one now that the thing has been found.
That's not the mean to be earnest. However, the description inside tells me this isn't your cigarette case.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you have no right whatsoever to read what's written on the inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it's absurd to have a fast rule of what should read and what one shouldn't. How about a culture depends on what one shouldn't read?
I have no doubt about that. And I don't propose to talk modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. Just give it back to me.
But this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present of someone named Cecily. And you said yourself you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you must know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt.
Charming old lady. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
But why is your aunt, who's in Tunbridge Wells, call herself Little Cecily? From Little Cecily, we're a father's love.
What on earth is there in that? Some ants are tall, some ants are not tall. That is surely a matter each ant can decide for herself. You seem to think every ant should be exactly like your aunt. That's absurd. For goodness sake, Algie, just give it back.
Does not account why your dear Aunt Cecily, who at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. From Little Cecily, we're fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There's no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. Why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should refer to her own nephew as her uncle. I can't make it out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
You've always told me it was Ernest. You answered the name Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. It's even on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the album. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if you ever try to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Jack in the country and Ernest in town. And the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, let's not account why your dear Aunt Cecily calls you her dear Uncle Jack. Come on, boy. You just have the thing out at once.
The thing out at once. Algie, you talk as if you were a dentist. It is a very vulgar thing to talk as a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that's exactly what dentists always do. Now, I've always suspected you being a secret and confirmed unburious, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Unburious? What on earth is unburious?
I will reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you're kind enough to inform me why you're Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation, and pray make it improbable
There is nothing improbable about my explanation. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. The old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, left me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle out of motives of respect you can't possibly appreciate, resides at my place in the country under charge of her esteemed governess, Miss Prism.
Where is this place in the country, by the way?
That is of no importance to you. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have been buried in Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear friend, I feel you may not be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. You see, when one is placed in the position of a guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said for one's health and one's happiness, in order to come up to town more often, I've created a younger brother of the name Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear friend, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is really pure and never simple. What you are is a Bunburyist, one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, so you may come up to the town as often as you like. I have invented a very permanent invalid called Bunbury, so I go down the country as often as I please. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinarily bad health, for instance, I would be down to the Wilsons tonight, for I've been more than engaged in Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked for you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. It's perfectly careless of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving an invitation.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
Nothing induces me to dine with Aunt Augusta. For starters, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, I am treated as a member of the family and sit down with no one at all or two. In the third place, she always places me next to Mary Farquhar because of her own husband across the dinner table. It is perfectly horrid. The amount of women in London who have their own husbands is perfectly disgraceful. It's simply washing one's own clean linen in public. It looks so bad. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him at any rate. Cecily's become a little too fond of him. It's rather a bore. So yes, I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I advise you do the same with your friend, your indolent friend with the absurd name.
Nothing would induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to be extremely problematic, you'd be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries not knowing Bunbury has a very choose time of it.
If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I would ever marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
And your wife, though, you don't understand that a married household, 3 is company and 2 is not.
That, my dear friend, is a theory that the French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
And they have an English home has been half the time. Now, that's the Aunt Augusta. Now, if I get out of the way for 10 minutes so you may propose to Gwendolyn, may I down to the Wilsons tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people not serious about meals. It's so shallow with them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Hello, my dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm very well, Aunt Augusta. Thank you.
Well, that's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two rarely go together.
Dear me, aren't you smart?
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I'm not that. It would leave no room for development, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on the dear Lady Harborough. I hadn't seen her since her poor husband's death. She looks quite altered. I have never seen a woman. She years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers at the market today, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
Not even for ready money.
That'll do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm so sorry, Aunt Augusta. For there are no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
Oh, it really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some comments with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her has turned quite cold from grief.
Indeed it has, but from what cause I cannot say. Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight. I'm going to put you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I have to decline math invitations after all.
Oh, I hope not. That would put my table completely out. Your husband would have... your uncle, pardon me, would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great burden and honestly, a huge disappointment on my part. And you see, I just received a telegram my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. And they seem to think I should be with him.
Strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously poor health.
Yes, Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say that I think it is high time Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you would talk to Mr. Bunbury from me and ask him not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I require you to arrange my program for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that encourages conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has already said practically everything they wanted to, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he's still conscious. And I can say with quite certainty he'll be all right by Saturday. The music, on the other hand, is the real problem. You see, if people write good music, people don't listen. And if people write bad music, people don't talk. However, I'll go over the program I've done out with you. If you kindly step in the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. That is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French music I cannot possibly allow. But people always seem to think it's inappropriate and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. German music, on the other hand, seems to be a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe, is such. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mama.
Charming day it's been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into the room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I've admired you more than any other girl I've met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. Though I wish that in public, at any rate, you'd been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. And my ideal has always been to love a man with the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. From the moment Algernon first told me he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
Oh, Gwendolyn, do you really love me?
Passionately. Worthing.
Oh, darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, but say it was something else. Do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Yes, but I don't much care for the name Earnest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It is a divine name. It suits you perfectly. From the moment it has a music of its own, produces vibrations.
Yes, but there are other much nicer names. I'd say Jack, for instance. A charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack. Nothing at all. Indeed, it does not thrill. Produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. And besides, Jack's a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman married to a man called John. She will probably never know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No, the only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened. That means we must get married at once.
Married Mr. Worthing.
Well, I love you, and you've led me to believe you're not entirely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I certainly think it an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Oh, Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Worthing? What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it? I'm afraid you have very little experience in how to propose.
Oh, I've never loved any other girl but you.
Well, yes. But then I'll propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderful eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like this, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing hasn't quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not anything of the kind. When you do become engaged, I or your father, should his health permit it, will remind you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. Nor do I in any way approve of a young girl allowing to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. And while I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma.
Gwendolyn, the carriage. Gwendolyn, the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to put your name down should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you
Yes, I must admit I smoke.
I am pleased to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A fine age to be married at. I am always of opinion that a man either knows everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I don't approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom dies. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square and probably be dangerous for the upper classes. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly?
That is satisfactory. But between the duties expected of one during one's life and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land ceases to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives people position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
I do own a house in the country with some land attached to it, of course, about 1,500 acres. However, I don't rely on that for my main income. The only people who make anything out of it really are the poachers.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You do have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I do own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let to the year to a Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I'd like, after 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
She goes about very little and is considerably advanced in years.
But that gives no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrade Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that can easily be altered.
The fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. Now on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents, but it would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents have lost me. I don't know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew found me and gave me the name Worthing because he had a first-class ticket to Worthing in his front pocket. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
And where did the charitable gentleman with the first-class ticket to this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag.
Yes, Lady Bracknell. A black, leather, rather large handbag with handles on it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
And where did the Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
The Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. I must say I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds me of one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I sure hope that you know what that revolution led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal social indiscretions. Indeed, it probably has been used for that before now. But it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a regular position in good society.
Well, what would you advise me to do? I need hardly say I do anything to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't see how that is possible, Lady Bracknell. I have the handbag back at home in my dressing room. I really think that should satisfy you.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You could hardly imagine that I or Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and to form an alliance with a parcel? Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. Oh, Algie, don't play that ghastly tune. How idiotic you are.
You didn't go all right, little boy. You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you. She's always refusing people. It's most of the nature of her.
Oh, Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. It's her mother who is unbearable. Never seen such a gorgon. I don't know what a gorgon is exactly, but I'm quite sure Lady Bracknell is one. Either way, she's a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair, I guess. I'm sorry, I suppose I shouldn't talk of your own aunt that way before you.
My dear fellow, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only way there's a put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who don't have the slightest knowledge how to live, but the most instinct of when to die.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I'm not going to argue about it. You always want to argue about things.
That's exactly the thing that you were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I caught that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's a chance Gwendolyn's going to turn into her mother in about 150 years, do you think?
All women become like their mothers. That is a tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased, as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody's clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting somebody clever. It's a public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
Oh, we have.
I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, have you told Gwendolyn how you were Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
One doesn't just blurt these things out to a sweet, refined girl like Gwendolyn. What ideas do you have about the way to behave to a woman?
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she's pretty, or to someone else if she's plain.
Oh, that's nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the petulant Earnest?
Oh, I'll have him gone by the end of the week. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die quite suddenly of apoplexy now, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear boy. Better see he died of severe chill.
A severe chill? You're sure that isn't hereditary?
Of course it isn't.
All right, then. My poor brother Ernest, carried off in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
What about poor Miss Cardew? Was she quite interested in your brother Ernest? Was she was lost a good deal?
Cecily's not a silly, romantic girl, I am glad to say. She's got a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and pays absolutely no attention at all to her lessons.
I'd very much like to meet Cecily.
I will make very sure that you never do. She's excessively pretty and only 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn and Cecily pretty ward is only just 18?
One doesn't just blurt these things out. Besides, I bet half an hour after Gwendolyn and Cecily first meet, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only call each other sister after they call each other love other things first. Now, you really must be off. If you want to get a good table of Wilson's. Did you know it's nearly 7?
Oh, it's almost always nearly 7 for you.
Why, I'm hungry.
I never knew when you weren't.
What should we do after dinner? Go to a theater?
Oh, no, I loathe listening.
Well, then let's go to a club.
No, I hate talking.
Then what shall we do?
Nothing.
It's awfully hard work to do nothing. However, I don't mind hard work if there is no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algie, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You're not quite old enough to do that.
My own one.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she
affliction may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often. Nothing she can ever do can ever alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my being. Your Christian name makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. The simplicity of your character is amazing. Your town address at the Albany I have, but what is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
They have a good postal service, I suppose? It may be necessary to do something drastic, though that will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
Oh, Gwendolyn.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn around now.
Thanks. I turned around already.
And you may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, will you?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane. I'm going Bunbury.
Yes, sir.
You shall put on all my dressing shirts, my smoking jacket, all the necessary Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are the perfect pessimist.
I strive for perfection, sir.
There is a sweet, perfect, beautiful girl. The only girl in my life I would ever love. What on earth is so amusing?
Oh, I'll be working at Port Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't do something about Mr. Bunbury, he's going to get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
That's nonsense. You always talk nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Schultz said at the beginning, you're sitting in a new auditorium to us. Out of breath, sorry. Now to show off our new lights, we have a light show that two students, our master electricians, Cody Christ and Sierra Morgan, they did this entire thing in a week. The only thing Mr. Schultz and I did was stay late so they could be in the building. So now, Brooklyn Bolin on the console, take it away.